So good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. We want to especially thank any guests who are with us. Thank you so much for giving your Sunday morning to us, and we're just so excited that you're here. And we'd love to meet you after the service. Thanks to all those who are watching online. We're just so grateful you're with us, and keep those comments coming. It's kind of fun to interact with each other when you're online. So go ahead and fill up that comment section. I'm going to show you a really cool video in just a few minutes. So we've done this Uganda mission for probably about 3 years now, maybe 4 years. So many of you have supported this. I think over the years we've probably given upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 to this mission. We are going to take a special mission offering today. So the way we do the offering here at the Water's Edge is as you're coming in, as you're going, we have the boxes with the balloons that say like "We Give" on there. This is our chance to partner with all the people that go to Uganda to help them be successful. So they pay for their entire trip, all the stuff that they do, they pay for. They invest thousands of dollars in this. And then we as a church partner with them. We'll supply medicine, pharmaceutical stuff, medical stuff, and we have literally served thousands of people over the last few years. Chris Syme, who's the leader of the team, he's here this morning. He'll be back at the table after the worship experience. He'd love to talk to you about doing this, but he recently won an award from the local Fox station, and I want to show you what y'all helped Chris accomplish.
Go where there's no path and leave a trail. That's what Chris Syme has made his life's mission.
We can bring the services that we provide to them.
10 years ago, he went on his first mission trip to Belize.
A few years after I started going, I learned how to fit people for eyeglasses.
But Syme says he wanted that path to grow.
Trying to get somewhere else where there was a little more need for the services that we provided, and we talked about Africa.
So he and a group of physicians headed to Uganda.
We want to be able to see a minimum of 2,000 people.
For 2 weeks each November, they do malaria and HIV testing, handing out insect repellents and eyeglasses.
We'll generally have between 100 and 300 people waiting for us when we get to the school.
As Syme looks at the photos and the artwork he brings back from the village, he remembers the people and their stories. Like this woman looking for help for a 10-month-old who weighed only 9 pounds.
Just severely malnourished. We were able to get that child transportation to a healthcare facility in an urban area.
Syme hopes his group will leave a lasting imprint on the country and its people.
If we can get more physicians, if we can get an additional pharmacist, maybe some more nurses, we're hoping that we can see even more people.
And someday bring along his own children.
We want to present you with this medal and certificate for this month's Jefferson Award.
Well, thank you. It's very nice. There's just so much need, and it's so rewarding to be able to help them. You really want to find ways to do more.
Maria Thompson, Fox 42 News.
All right, well, congratulations, Chris. That's a great award for you. So Chris will be back at the missions table. He'll be signing autographs actually after the service. So take your program back there. He'll sign it for you, frame it. It's worth at least the paper that's printed on, and probably a little bit more. But seriously, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're a pharmacist, if you're in the medical field, Chris would love to talk to you after the worship service. If you're not a doctor, if you're not a pharmacist, if you're not a nurse, Chris would love to talk to you after the worship service because there's need for everybody. This is a trip for anybody. It's a great thing we do. There's many ways to do. You can give cash or a check in the offering box. There's ways to give online, text messaging. Check all that stuff out in your bulletin. And let's make sure we're really resourcing this team to succeed. The trip is usually like late October, early to mid-November in that time frame. So even if God's tugging on your heart a little bit today, talk to Chris, and he'd love to chat with you. All right, so we're continuing this series called Unfiltered, and the reason we're doing this series called Unfiltered is that many of us are running our lives through filters so that we actually appear to be someone other than who we are. It creates a gap of who we actually are and who we appear to others. When this gap gets to be big enough, it creates all sorts of stress and anxiety. When we can diminish the gap, reduce the gap, and eliminate the gap, at that point we become an authentic person. And Throughout these 5 weeks, my prayer, our prayer, is that we can become authentic people. Next week, we're going to look at the last week of Unfiltered. We're going to look at this God's concept of Sabbath. And I think, all this projecting of being somebody other than we are and trying to live up to the expectations of others, it does cause us a lot of stress and anxiety. We get really busy. We can get really tired, and God has a plan for that, and it's called Sabbath. And next week we're going to look at, we're going to make the case for, some idleness, some rest, some balance, some refocusing in our lives. That's something we'll talk about a few times a year, and we're going to talk about that one next week. Now today we're going to talk about compassion. You notice throughout the series I've told some Old Testament stories, and this morning it's one of my favorites, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a little boy. His name was Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth, he was a somebody. In fact, in a city of somebodies, he was a somebody. He was a child of a king. He was a prince. His dad's name was Jonathan. His grandpa's name is Saul. As a little boy, he played in the palace. He had all the fun toys. He had people to watch after him. As a 5-year-old child, his life was it was pretty darn good. He looked out the window in the palace, and he would have saw the large city and the large valley. And he didn't know it at the time, but he would one time become the ruler of this land. At least that's how it was supposed to work out. And then one day, things, they changed. His dad, Jonathan, was off at a battle at Mount Gilead, and his dad was killed. The uprising was successful. The monarchy was overthrown. His grandpa Saul was so upset that he killed himself. Now at this point, Mephibosheth would have been 5 years old, the Bible tells us in an earlier narrative, and he had to run for his life. The reason that he had to run for his life is because the new regime was coming, and what they would have done is they would have killed everybody associated with the existing regime. They would have taken absolutely no prisoners. It didn't matter if you're an old woman. It didn't matter if you're a young child. They would have been executed. So his servants loved him, and they knew that he had to get somewhere, and he had to get somewhere fast. So they picked the boy up, and they escaped from the castle. And the Bible doesn't tell us where it happened. It doesn't tell us when. It only tells us that it did happen. But as they were escaping, one of the servants dropped the 5-year-old child. He fell to the ground and broke both of his ankles. Now, they didn't have any time to stop and care for him. They had to get out of Jerusalem, and they had to get out of Jerusalem fast. So they picked him up, and they continued to run. They continued to run until they ended up in a distant city named Lodabar. Now, you've probably never heard of the city of Lodabar before. Unless you're familiar with the story in 2 Samuel chapter 9, you definitely wouldn't know about this city. Lodabar in the original Hebrew, it means barren land. Lodabar was a city of nobodies. Now in Lodabar, there was no orthopedic surgeons. This kid had 2 broken feet, and there wasn't a darn thing that anybody could do about it. The Bible says that Mephibosheth, he lived as a crippled. He used to live in a palace, and his new normal is that he lives in a hut. He used to have people take care of him, and now he's pretty much on his own. It used to be that his best days were in front of him, and Mephibosheth could actually look in the mirror and honestly say to himself that his best days were behind him. And if you ever get to that point in life, you know how tough and you know how painful that is. Now, you know that Lodabar is a cruel place. This barren land, this city of nobodies. And you know that Lodabar is a cruel place because at a minimum, you have driven through Lodabar before. And there's many of us that have staked up a residence in this city. Now, you still got your address. It might be Gretna, it might be Papillion, it might be Omaha, it might be Elkhorn. You still got that address, but for many of us, ours is the land of Lodabar. I know a man who lives in Lodabar. He's divorced. He wishes that he could spend more time with his kids, but he's too busy working. He doesn't have much custody, and regret and guilt are his constant companions. I know a high school student who lives in Lodabar, and she is literally being crushed under the high and unrealistic expectation of her parents. She knows all about Lodabar. I know a couple who lives there. Their already dysfunctional marriage is under a bunch of stress because she lost her job. There's a man who's waiting for medical results. There's a girl who was called fat by somebody, and now she doesn't like the way that she looks, and she gets sad and depressed, and she copes with that because she overeats, and things get worse, and hers is the city of Lodabar. There's a person who struggles with depression. There's a man who is addicted to pills. There's a woman whose dreams aren't coming true. There's a person that even feels lonely when he is surrounded by a bunch of people, and he knows what it's like to live in Lodabar. You see, Lodabar is actually a very large city. Physically and metaphorically, there's a lot of people who live there. Some are passing through. Some may stay a few nights. Some have lived there for a long time. Now, just when you thought that things couldn't get any worse for Mephibosheth, he gets some worse news. There's this guy, he's a new king. His name's David. And David is doing what any responsible king would do. David is looking for anybody associated with any of the previous regimes who are still alive. So David, he finds Jonathan's servant. His name is Ziba. And he asks Ziba the question, is there anybody alive from like Saul's family or Jonathan's family? Do you know of anybody? Now, Ziba, he thought about it for a second, and listen to what he says. He says, there's one of Jonathan's son. He's crippled with both feet. Now, this answer is really strange, right? Ziba knows Mephibosheth's name, but he doesn't even give David his name. The name, it doesn't even matter. Because what he's doing is he's defining Mephibosheth. Yeah, he's the son of Jonathan, and he's defined as being crippled in both feet. Now, Mephibosheth here was defined by another person. He joined a really big club that has expanded greatly since his life. Because there's some of us that have been called old. There's some of us that have been defined as fat, as average, as a failure, as anxious, as shy. There's people that are trying to define us, and that's what happened to Mephibosheth. Now, David wanted to know where this crippled kid was. He didn't know his name, but he wanted to know where he was. So he found out that he was in Lodabar. So David sent for Mephibosheth. Now, if you're Mephibosheth, at this point, you're filled with terror. He's okay, my life isn't that great right now. I'm living in this little hut alone on this dirt floor, and I'm eating scraps. I can't walk, but at least I'm alive. And now this guy David wants to see me. And Mephibosheth knew that he was going to his own execution. He knew that the new king would take care of him. It wasn't an easy trip. But the next few verses in 2 Samuel chapter 9, it's going to be some of the coolest stuff you'll ever read in the Old Testament. Mephibosheth, he didn't go to his execution. There was something else that happened. So David, he looked at the hopeless Mephibosheth and said, now here's what he says, but imagine here's this guy. He's probably a late teenager in his early 20s by now. He knows that this new king is going to kill him. He knows that not his days, his hours are limited. And here's what David says. Don't be afraid. I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father Jonathan. I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you'll eat here with me forever at the king's table. Okay, so if there's a story in the Hebrew Scriptures that foreshadows the Gospels, this is it. This is what's called compassion. This is what's called grace. Mephibosheth, he moved from death to life. He moved from hopelessness to a blessed life. He moved from Lodabar to Jerusalem. He moved from eating ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese out of a box to fresh fish and fresh vegetables. Now, the reason that I tell this story is because Mephibosheth is with us this morning. In fact, I would argue that there's a little bit of Mephibosheth in all of us, and there's a whole lot of Mephibosheth in some of us. We are born to a king. We share that in common with him. We are born to the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, the highest king. The promises that God makes belong to us. And then one day, life happens. Life got messy for us, just like it did for Mephibosheth. We made a bad choice, and all of a sudden, we find ourselves exiled from the promised land in Jerusalem to the city of Lodabar. Somebody else makes a bad choice. It has negative effects on us, and we find ourselves living in Lodabar. Sometimes bad things just happen for reasons that are unexplainable, and we find ourselves living in the city of Lodabar. But the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, invites us to his table. Now, this is not because we're deserving. It's not because we're worthy. It's because he is generous, and it's because he is loving. It's called compassion. And I want you to know this morning that as I stand before you, that God's supply of compassion is limitless and endless. You know, for all of us who are old, for all of us who are fat, for all of us who are anxious, for all of us who are shy, for all of us who are a failure, the King invites us to his table. Now, God has a name for you, and it has nothing to do with that list of names that I just rattled off. God has a name for you, and God has one of two names for you. It's either you're his beloved daughter or you're his beloved son. Now, I could not imagine any circumstance in life where my two sons would not be invited to eat at my table. Now, our loving, our generous, our benevolent God is so much better than me. And he cannot imagine that there's any circumstances in our life that would prevent us from being invited and accepting that invitation to eat at the King's table. Now, if you're passing through Lodabar, if you're going through like a rough patch and you're passing through Lodabar, don't stop. Don't hit the brake pedal, hit the gas pedal. Get out of there as quickly as you can. Lodabar is this place you don't want to live. Do the U-turn and head back to Jerusalem. Now, if you are living in Lodabar, if you got a house there, what you need to do is find a real estate agent. And you need to list this thing, and someone will buy it. And the reason they'll buy it is because people move to Lodabar every day. What you need to do is get on Zillow.com, and you need to start looking for a new house in Jerusalem, because that's a much better address. You're invited to live there, not because you're worthy or deserving, but because the King of all kings is generous and loving. Now, I was thinking, we're actually going to all take communion in just a little bit. I was thinking that Jesus was talking to 12 former residents, passers through of the city of Lodabar, when he took the bread and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body that's given for you." And he did the same with the wine. And he said, "This is my forgiveness that's given for you." All of them were invited to eat at the King's table, just like we today are going to be invited to eat at the King's table. Now, there's a lot of Mephibosheths here. I think the last 10 minutes have probably spoken to some of you. Now, what I hope is that there's a lot of Davids here as well. I hope there's a lot of Davids that are here as well. Because I believe, and I know, what the world needs today is not better leaders, better policy, a better economy. Those things are going to come and go. Just read your history book. You'll find times they've been great and not so great. What the world needs today, more than anything else, more than everything else, what your family needs today, more than anything else and everything else, is compassion. Just think what type of revolution could happen if we started treating everybody with kindness. Think about like the outcome if we could be totally patient with other people like God is patient with us. If we could follow the golden rule of loving others or treating others like we want to be treated. Yeah, the world needs compassion. Your world needs compassion. And what I did is I observed how David treated Mephibosheth, and we see that this happens in 4 steps. First of all, David gave away what God had given to him. Now, you know David's story, right? Like, David was a little guy, and he took a river rock, and he put it in a sling, and he pulled back the sling, and he slayed this mighty Philistine giant, Goliath. You know, David was a war hero. He later became a military general. He was a city planner. Jerusalem was his idea. David became a king, and a very good king. David was a musician. Like, he would sing these psalms, and when he would sing these psalms, everybody's headaches would go away. You know, the Bible describes David, his highest calling in life, and the Bible called him this. The Bible said that David was a man after God's own heart. Now, you know something else about David, right? Like, he committed adultery, he killed somebody, and then he tried to cover it up. It's the same guy. So David knew something about receiving God's compassion. Now, David was after God's own heart, and David knew who God was. David knew God to be a benevolent, compassionate God. So what David said is, I'm created in God's image. God is a compassionate God. Therefore, me at my best, I'm going to practice compassion. And like David, I really think probably when Mephibosheth was there, it's like, okay, this isn't obligation, this isn't duty, this isn't, me doing what I think might be right. I can't wait to sit down, and I can't wait to talk to this guy. I can't wait to have him be part of my life. So what we do is we do what David did. We give others the same compassion that God gives to us. And when you can start doing this, like, this cycle is going to happen. It's going to be easier to receive compassion, and you give more, and all of a sudden your life and all those around you, you're headed in the right direction. Now, the second thing that David did is David took initiative. David didn't wait for Mephibosheth to come to him. David took initiative. He didn't troll Mephibosheth's Facebook page, where Mephibosheth had the status update, just another boring day in Lodabar. I miss Jerusalem. David didn't hit the like button. David didn't say, hey, man, I'm praying for you. David didn't say, hey, if there's any way I can help, let me know. David sent his people to get him and bring Mephibosheth to him. Now, I'm probably going to step on a few toes, so you might want to lift your feet up if you don't like that type of stuff. So here's how this works. I think in our world today, we've just become so desensitized to human pain. We can see these mass killings. We can see these wars in the Middle East. We can see people not being treated like people and like it's normal. Because we have access to news and messages and photos and videos in real time, 24 hours a day, I think in my lifetime I've seen the world has become desensitized. Now, here's how this works. If you see something on someone's Instagram account or their Facebook account that they're going through a rough time, many of us will hit the dislike button, or we'll write a nice note that says, praying for you, let me know if I can do anything. And I want you to know that that's good. It lets people know that they have a community. I'm going to tell you something better, though. Pick up your phone and send them a text message. Say, hey, I know you're going through a tough time. I'm in your corner. Anything I can do, let me know. That's better. That's an improvement. But it's still not as good as we can do, right? What you can do is you can sit down and you can actually, on a sheet of paper, write them a note and mail it to them, and just tell them how much they mean to you and how you're pulling for them. And encourage them, like bless them that way and put it in the mail and send it to them. That's an improvement, but it's not as good as picking up the telephone where you say, hey, Fred, I just heard about what's going on, and man, I'm so sorry about your brother. That just stinks, and I'm praying for you. I'm here for you. Can we sit down? Can we talk? Can I listen to you? How can I pray for you? That's good, but it's still, there's a better way to do it. The best way to do it that I can think of is actually pull into somebody's driveway and call them up and say, hey, this is Craig, and I'm in your driveway, and I kind of heard what you're going through, and I don't know if you're dressed or not, but you got 3 minutes to put your clothes on because I'm coming inside, and we're gonna listen, and we're gonna pray, and we're gonna be there and support each other. The best compassion is not going to happen from behind a computer screen. The best compassion happens face to face. So when Chris started this whole thing with Uganda, he didn't like the Facebook page, Americans for Medical Relief in Uganda. What Chris did is he bought an airplane ticket and he went over there. We hooked him up with someone that we knew from Uganda. He explored the territory, he met the people, he heard the stories, he came back and he says, we need this much money and we need this much people, and we got all that stuff, he got all that stuff. They got on an airplane. Now literally thousands of people, their lives have been made better because someone was there. I mean, you'll put glasses on somebody's face and now they can see like they've never seen before. You can give somebody some medicine for malaria and all of a sudden within a few days their life is so much better. That's how compassion happens. Like, I'm not going to get political because I don't do that, but let's just take like this refugee thing. I mean, you hear about this in the news every day. Now you can get online, you can say, I believe this or I believe that and whatever. I mean, that's your choice. But that's not compassion, because compassion does not happen from behind a computer. Now, if you want to help, let us know. Like, the Lutheran Family Services has let us know that this week, there's families here in Omaha that need to be driven around. We have a family that we support. Compassion is going down to 50th and Ames and sitting there and listening to people learn English and taking them from appointment to appointment. That's what it is. Compassion is, instead of complaining about our educational system, compassion is sitting down and reading with a child. Compassion is real life with real people. Now, I'll tell you how this works. Like, I think it should probably start at your house, like with the people that you live with. Like, listen to them. Like this week, practice patience. Just serve with absolutely no agenda and no strings attached. Ask a question, how can I help you? How can I make your life better? What can we do to make this thing work better? Like if you're a student, like at this school, if you go to Beetle, if you go to Russell, if you go to Willowdale, wherever you go, compassion isn't signing a petition against bullying. Compassion means that when you see somebody being mistreated, what you do is you stand up for them because they have no one else who will. Compassion is finding the person on your block that is alone and lonely, and it's befriending them. Compassion doesn't happen from behind a computer screen, behind the filters of life. Compassion happens in real life, in real time, with real people. Compassion's not easy. It's just not. Compassion is tough stuff. Now, the third thing we learned from David is he was generous. Compassion is always going to be attached to generosity. We don't give what's left over. We don't give what's easy. David gave all of Saul's possessions back to Mephibosheth. Compassion means that we give somebody else our best. It means that we say that, I'm not going to quit until there's some peace and contentment and joy in your life. And the last thing that we learn from David is that compassion is ongoing. Now notice the last verse. I think it's verse 13. I don't have the citation in front of me. The last verse, it says that Mephibosheth, who remained crippled in both feet, continued to eat at the king's table. This was not a one-time transaction. David didn't just say, okay, come and eat. You'll get a good meal. I'll feel better about myself. No, it's like an ongoing thing. Like it doesn't stop. So God is compassionate. We're created in God's image. Therefore, we're compassionate people. Who we are shapes what we do. And what we do then is compassion. Compassion is not an event. It's not a single choice. Compassion is a lifestyle where we can say to other people, where we can say to the world, that I'm not going to rest until there's some peace and contentment and some joy in your life. Now, I think the greatest act of compassion in human history was the compassion of Christ himself. So what Jesus did is he gave his life. He suffered a painful death so that each of us passers through of Lodabar and all of us residents of Lodabar and all of us past residents of Lodabar can experience the life that God is trying to give us. So Jesus, he took the bread and he knew that there was some residents of Lodabar there. He knew there were some people that had been there before, and he looked, this is the feast. This is the feast that was foreshadowed in 2 Samuel chapter 9, where Jesus says, friends, this is my body that is given for you. When you eat of this, do so in remembrance of me. And likewise, Jesus took the wine, he blessed it, he gave thanks and said, friends, this is the blood. It's the blood of the new covenant that has been poured out for you in the forgiveness of your sins. When you drink of this, do so in remembrance of me. And what I want us to remember this morning is the compassion of Jesus. The one who touched the skin of the leper when nobody else would. Can you imagine what it would be like going through life with nobody being able to touch you? The one who forgave the prostitute. That was the compassion of Jesus. Like, he would search the hurting people, he would find them, and he would love them. So let us go to God and let us pray.